I don't think that you find however many characters, was there like 4 or 5 of them, that like every single nerdy thing. I mean, there's not characters like that.
No.
Like, I fucking hate Jumanji. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going good, dude. How are you?
I'm excited to finally record. Today at work was kind of a shit show, so I'm looking forward to getting that sour taste out of my mouth.
So this is how you get your sour taste out of your mouth?
No, I mean, I look forward to recording every week, and
yeah,
it was a really awful. I know I complain about my work a lot. It's actually a really cushy job most of the time. It just Fridays are always really busy, and we usually record on Fridays. So I'm usually in a really bad mood until we start recording, and I really enjoyed doing this. So it was an extra long day, though. It was an extra tough Friday. I actually had something happen that was just so awful.
Yeah? Did you shit yourself at work?
No, but it's actually ass related.
Oh, fantastic.
I saw a grown man, truck driver, to make it even worse, his bare ass. Just my job, I've talked about this before. My job involves me dealing with truck drivers a lot, which is, I mean, they're basically animals for the most part.
Somewhere there's a truck driver that listens to our podcast all the time when he drives back and forth places, and he's crying right now.
Yeah. Well, if he's Russian, he can suck my dick. Anyways, a part of that job you're just going to see some truck driver ass crack. It's just going to happen. It's a blessing or a curse, depending on your perspective. But today, I literally saw one bend over, and his pants just completely fell to the ground. And I was like, Jesus Christ. It was, I'm just going to go to the doctor tomorrow. They're going to surgically remove my eyes because I don't need them anymore. It was horrible. I'm just so glad he wasn't standing facing me.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't want to see his dick.
So was he not wearing underwear?
I guess not.
And what was his reaction when it happened? Did he play it off? Or
he just this happens all the time, and he just pulled him back up. I was like, Jesus Christ, man, just get the fuck out of here. It was awful. And then the day itself was just horrible. But yeah, I mean, that was definitely.
Yeah, it doesn't sound fun, dude.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you can imagine, I'm excited to get this episode started to get this horrible day.
My day wasn't fantastic, but I didn't see anybody's bare ass. So I guess you have a one up on me.
For sure. So if this is your first episode, I apologize for that really weird intro. We start off each episode by kind of checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
I'm going to actually recycle something I talked about, I guess, this time last year on the podcast. It's a show called You're the Worst, and it just recently came back for its 3rd season. The episode 3 of the 3rd season just aired this week, and I have been keeping up with it. I talked about season 1. I don't know that I ever talked about season 2 on the podcast. I think that I had just finished season 1, but season 1 and 2 are both fantastic. They flow really well as a story. Season 2 in particular kind of takes a turn from season 1. It deals with a lot of, I don't want to say adult things, because obviously season 1 deals
more
with
mental health.
Yeah, it deals with a lot of deep stuff. So deals with Gretchen, the main actress, or not actress, the main character, her depression, and how that affects her and Jimmy's relationship, affects her as a person. And it got a lot of critical acclaim for that because it displays it very well. And is really realistic in how it shows her dealing with her depressions. It seems like they must have hit their groove in season 2 when they kind of took that dramatic turn, because they're continuing that into season 3 a little bit. I don't want to come across as saying it's gone from a comedy to a drama, because there's still a ton of comedy in it, but it doesn't look like this show's going to let up as far as dealing with big issues goes, big personal issues goes. So in season 3, Gretchen's getting help with her depression, like she promises Jimmy at the end of season 2. And while
spoilers, I'm only like halfway through season 2.
You never finished season 2?
No.
Oh shit.
Well, I started watching it after you discussed it the last time, and you actually did talk about season 2, because I remember you bringing up, I can't think of his name. I'm terrible with names. The roommate. Edgar
is his character's name, yeah.
Yeah, him doing improv, and that doesn't happen until season 2.
Yeah. Have you gotten to that yet?
Yes. I'm like halfway through season 2, and I really liked season 1, but at the time, that was the only season on Hulu. So I had only watched it, and they just recently, when season 3 started, they put up season 2 as well. So my wife and I just started watching season 2.
Okay, well, I will try to skirt around anything that happens towards the end of season 2. I think I'm done with season 2 though. So, like I was saying, she's doing better with her depression, but things kind of start to take a turn for Jimmy and Edgar. I don't want to spoil things for you, but I have to go over basic plot points at this point. So Jimmy sells his book deal and ends up finding out. Well, he finds out in episode 3, but his father dies, and then Edgar he stops taking his PTSD medication because it prevents him from getting an erection, and he's getting frustrated. So he starts to kind of deal with a mental health aspect as well, kind of like Gretchen does in season 2. Episode 3, the one that just aired is Gretchen trying to find out. She finds out before Jimmy does that his father has passed away, and it's her trying to find out how to tell Jimmy. And they make it really funny, even though it's, a sad issue, something that's pretty dark, but this show does dark comedy so well that it's really great. So I would say there's a scene at the end of episode 3 that really epitomizes what this show's kind of become. So I said I wasn't going to spoil anything for you, but sorry, I'm going to spoil the end of episode 3 of season 3. So Gretchen ends up telling Jimmy that his dad has passed away, and he just stands in shock. He's not really quite sure what to do, and she doesn't know how to deal with stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she just starts going down on him.
I actually figured that's where it was going.
Like he's just standing there in shock, and she's just kind of like looking up at him and just kind of drops to her knees. So like obviously he's going through a lot, but it just shows how well that this show mixes the comedy and the drama and like real life situations with these characters that are kind of terrible sometimes. So so far I'm really digging it. I'm really excited to see where season 3 goes. I mean, we still have 7 to 9 episodes left. I don't know how many episodes. I would assume 10 to 12, like the first 2 seasons. But it's a really great show that I feel it doesn't get the appreciation it deserves, because people don't have access to it too much because it's on FXX, which I don't know that many people get that channel. So it's definitely a hidden gem that I'm going to continue to recommend.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen the first season, most of the second season. I really enjoy it. It's a show that kind of piqued my interest when it first aired, but back then I was my schedule was weird, so I never got around to actually watching it. But then you recommended it on an episode, and so I finally checked it out, and I was really glad that I did. First season, I completely agree with you, is a lot more funny.
Yeah.
A lot more funny. That's great grammar. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I just like characters that you don't necessarily you don't want to root for them, because you always see, especially in more traditional sitcoms, you see characters that are like fun loving, and I like the fact that these kind of break those characters, and I just really like those type. They seem more real, even though they are kind of over the top sometimes, but that's TV. Like, those characters have to be that way, or the TV show isn't interesting. So I think they kind of overcorrected a little bit with your traditional sitcom, but I do like different types of characters. I do think it's unlikely that all these weird people know each other in a big city like LA. Yeah. But that being said, I mean, that's TV and movies. They have a very small world type of problem, just because, I mean, they have to make all these characters really interesting. So I think it's a really fun show. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the more drama, because I've just gotten to that part.
Yeah, season 2 gets, I don't want to say dark, but it gets pretty sad for a couple episodes. I will say, though, since you're in the middle of season 2, like the last 2 episodes of the season are probably my favorite episodes of the show.
Yeah.
Like super funny and super heartwarming. So you definitely have that to look forward to.
Cool, man. We didn't plan it this way, but I'm actually, You're the Worst is on FXX. I'm actually going to talk about 2 shows that are on FX.
Okay.
They just premiered last week, Atlanta and Better Things. It's really kind of weird that I like these shows as much as I did, because I don't think that I'm necessarily the target demographic for either one of them. The first one that I'm going to talk about, Atlanta, is about a black inspiring rapper, and the Better Things, the second show I'm going to talk about, is about a middle-aged woman that's raising 3 kids, and none of those things describe me at all. So I was actually surprised at how much I liked these shows, because I can't really relate to either of the main characters. Atlanta is created by and starring Donald Glover from Community. I'm a huge Community fan, so I was kind of looking forward to his next project. He's a rapper himself, Childish Gambino, which is not the greatest rapper name, but I actually have a couple of his albums, and they're not bad.
I've always known that he's done that, but I've never listened to it. Is it like comedy rap, or does he do it like he's serious?
It's for sure rap.
Wow, I never knew that.
I mean, it's not the best, but I mean, again, I'm like the whitest person you could ever meet. I used to say, like, if I was any whiter, I'd be invisible. Like, I'm literally a ginger. So I'm like, figuratively and literally, I'm the whitest person that you would meet. So, I mean, I don't really know much about rap, but I like it just because it's him.
Yeah.
But anyways, the first 2 episodes of Atlanta were released back to back on September 6th. It follows Ern, who's played by Glover, who is trying to help his cousin Paperboy navigate. That's not his given name. I actually don't know what his name is on the show, because they just keep calling him that. Navigate the Atlanta rap scene. What I really like about this show, and I think one of the reasons I like You're the Worst, is it's unconventionally funny.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really sitcom-y. There's no setup and punchlines in this show. It's just awkwardly funny. Like, they put these characters in weird situations. Like, they're not the best people, so they find themselves in really weird situations. For example, Ern and Paperboy end up in jail in the first episode, and Paperboy gets out really quickly, but Ern has to wait to be processed. So he has to sit in the holding cell with all these other prisoners. And it's just really hilarious. But I shouldn't have laughed as hard as I did at this one particular scene. I think it just kind of shows you my kind of dark sense of humor. But one of the prisoners is obviously a regular, and he obviously has like something mentally wrong with him. He's just a kind of a weird guy, and he's just kind of pacing around the cell, and all the guards are kind of joking around with him because he's obviously been here a million times. And one of the older guards says something to him, and I don't remember if the prisoner puts his hand on him or if he says like "fuck you" or something like that. And the other guards just beat the shit out of him. And then they cut to Donald Glover, who's just like deer in the headlights, just sitting in this prison cell. And I laughed really hard. And I don't know if you're necessarily supposed to laugh as hard as I did, but it was hilarious to me. And then there's another scene in the prison where Donald Glover is sitting in between one guy and this other transvestite.
Yeah.
And the guy is hitting on this transvestite, and he's just, Donald Glover is so awkward because he's like, "Hey man, do you just want me to move?" And he's like, "What's your fucking problem, man?" It's really, really funny. I just like how it's not just like, oh, set up and punchline. Like, it's just really just odd situations the characters have found themselves in. It's just kind of my sense of humor. So I really like it. I'm looking forward to watching the next episode, which I think was earlier this week. I just haven't gotten a chance to watch it. Actually, both of these shows I think are on the same night. It's either Tuesday or Wednesday. I think they actually follow each other. And I haven't watched the second well, in Atlanta's case, the third episode. I haven't seen the second episode of Better Things yet either, just because I've been super busy this week. But Better Things is created very similar to Atlanta. It's created and starring by the same person, Pamela Adlon. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her last name.
She's a voice actress.
Yeah, she actually did
Louis.
Bobby Hill, King of the Hill. I didn't know that until I actually looked that up. Because I knew crazy, she was a voice actress, because I know she does a character in Bob's Burgers as well. And I did not know that she was Bobby Hill.
She was Spinelli in Recess. I don't know if you ever watched that show when you were younger.
No. I think I was a little too old for that.
Yeah, you might have been.
I've only caught a couple episodes because I think it was right before the Fox Ninja Turtles reboot.
Oh, so you weren't too old for that.
Ninja Turtles. But yeah, I mean, she also pops up in Louie. I think she is either won an Emmy or was nominated for an Emmy in Louie. But she's really great in that. She was actually his wife in Lucky Louie, which only had one season on HBO, which I actually like that show a lot. That's more traditional sitcom, though.
Yeah, it's on HBO now, and I've considered watching it, and I never.
It's all right. I mean, it's definitely him trying to make a more traditional sitcom, and I don't know if his experience on Lucky Louie kind of shaped Louie. I would assume that it did.
Oh, I'm sure.
But yeah, it's about Sam, who is a struggling actress who is trying to raise 3 young daughters in Hollywood. I've heard, I mean, this show's gotten a lot of good reviews, but I've also heard people kind of chalking it up as just a Louis knockoff. And I get that because, I mean, it's semi-autobiographical. She's an actress who also does voice work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's true to her actual life. She's a single parent raising kids in a big city in Hollywood versus New York and Louis. And it's shot very similarly, which would make sense because Louis C.K. actually directed the first episode. He co-created it with Pamela Adlon. I think I pronounced it differently the first time I said it.
Just pronounce it differently every time you say it.
But honestly, like, I don't care about that because I love Louis and I love that one episode that I've seen of Better Things so far. I think it's at its strongest when she's interacting with her kids, because all of her kids, I mean, they're weird, but they're weird in their own unique way.
Yeah.
One of them is like super rebellious and wants to take up on like all these different causes. She's talking about, this is a little graphic, but what the hell? She's talking about cutting off her clit as like part of a protest. And like, she's super kind of hippie, and the other one's just a typical teenage girl that wants to get high and hang out with boys. And one of them's a lot younger and she's kind of the mama's girl, and they're all kind of weird in their own way.
Yeah.
You could tell that she's kind of getting frustrated with her kids, and she doesn't really have a ton of help from the dad. And it's very similar to Louis in that aspect, that she's just kind of a regular person per se, trying to deal with this really weird, kind of crazy situation.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, actually. I want to watch that. But I guess the problem with cutting the cord, like I have, as far as my entertainment goes, is that I have never heard of either of these shows.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that FX has dropped the ball in marketing, because, I mean, obviously I'm all over the place on the internet and get my entertainment in other ways, and I've not seen anything for either of these shows. So that's the first I've heard of them. I don't know about Atlanta so much, but I am definitely interested in the other show. I already forgot what it's called, though. Better Things. Yeah, I'm interested in that for sure. And the comparisons to Louis, that's pretty lame, man, because Louis not on right now. Like, he's not in a hurry to make that show, give it another season. He's kind of taking his time doing other things, and that's a great show. What's the problem if there's like a sister show to it?
I mean, I could see why the people would say that, but
yeah,
I mean, it's a great show. So if you're going to make another great show, then what's the problem with that?
Oh, absolutely.
So our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two. So what'd you read this week?
So I was going to try really hard not to talk about this comic, because at a certain point, I think we're gonna, especially me, sound like a broken record. But I only had time logistically to read one comic before we recorded this week. I've just been super busy, and I wasn't going to not read this because I've been so excited for issue 2, and that comic is All-Star Batman, which we've talked about. We talked about leading up to it. We talked about issue 1. So I am going to continue and talk about issue 2. As we've said a million times, it's written by Scott Snyder, who Pat and I both really, really like. And we've both, gone on record about what fans we are. We did an entire main topic once devoted to him and Greg Capullo's run on Batman. So this book, I definitely confirmed in issue 2 that it's unlike any Batman book I've ever read. Most sites that I've I visit compare it to Mad Max and say it's Mad Max meets Batman, and that's obviously what it is. It's obvious that Scott Snyder has pulled some stuff from those films. This arc in particular is cool because it's taking stereotypes from the Batman universe and tweaking them enough to make them completely fresh to the mythos. So an example is a conversation that Duke and Alfred have in this book. Duke asks about, they're kind of explaining this, the psychology of Harvey Dent and Two-Face, and Duke's putting together that Two-Face remembers things from before he became Two-Face, just when he was Harvey Dent. So that means that he would know who Batman is. And Alfred has this perfect response to Duke. He's like, in Gotham, it's not hard to guess that Bruce Wayne is Batman, but he's made it impossible to connect the two. Yeah. Which I thought was really cool, because I think with most superheroes, when you have that aspect, or like people say it all the time about Clark Kent and Superman, it's like, how could you not guess that that's the secret identity? And this book just addresses it head on and says, a lot of people think they know it or guess it, but they can't prove it. Yeah, which is really interesting, and something that I think that only Batman could do in the DC universe. So obviously, there's a few different stories. I just mentioned Alfred and Duke, and of course, Batman and Two-Face. There's a few different storylines going on through this comic. In addition to the two I just mentioned, there's also a storyline with Jim Gordon that hasn't been completely fleshed out yet. We don't necessarily know what's going on. All we know is that he's going to be raiding Wayne Manor, and he really doesn't want to, but he's he makes it sound like his hand's being forced. And it's assumed that he's looking for proof that Batman and Bruce Wayne are the same person, but it's not explicitly said. So I'm really kind of curious to see where that goes. This issue in particular, though, Scott Snyder gets slap happy with villains. There's tons and tons of villains in this issue. And since Pat, you were telling me before we recorded that you hadn't read it yet, so I won't necessarily spoil who all's in it, but there are tons of B and C villains that Scott Snyder kind of puts a new spin on, and it's great. They just keep popping up to get the bounty that's on Batman's head that Harvey Dent / Two-Face put there. So definitely some cool utilization of villains in this book. Scott Snyder's obviously having a lot of fun with it. I mean, all in all, this comic book's been crazy. It's unlike any Batman story I've ever read, and it's just awesome that a character that's so old still has consistently great stories being told in his universe. So if you haven't gotten the impression yet, obviously we do love Scott Snyder, and I recommend All-Star Batman.
Yeah, I haven't read it, like you said. I just was super busy this week. I actually didn't get to do my weekly New Comic Book Day video because I've just been crazy busy. I actually skipped one of my Let's Plays again this week as well because, again, I've just been super busy. But I'm glad that you liked it because it seemed like you were a little lukewarm after the first issue.
I definitely felt like I was, yeah.
And I really liked the first issue, and I thought when we talked about it that you were going to love it, and then you, again, seemed kind of lukewarm, so I'm glad that you're finally really warming up to it.
Issue 2 definitely won me over. Issue 1, I think it was because I had some kind of expectation for it.
Sure.
And I had some kind of expectation for Scott Snyder. And so much happens in issue 2, and so much of it's fresh, and he did a lot of great stuff in it. So I'm definitely fully on board now.
Cool, man.
All right. What did you read?
I, like you, only had time to read one comic, and it was a comic that I had been looking forward to for a little bit now, pretty much for the last month since I found out that it was going to be a thing. The Strain, Mr. Quinlan, Vampire Hunter, #1. That's quite the mouthful. The Strain is a show that obviously I've talked a lot about on the podcast. I reviewed the first seasons on our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Again, I was looking forward to this book. Quinlan is easily my favorite character on the show, which is saying a lot, because if you would hear that, you would normally think, well, he's easily your favorite character because there's just bad characters. No, there's a lot of great characters. Dutch aside, I really fucking hate that character a lot in that show. But I love most of these characters, and he's easily my favorite character. He's so fucking badass, and he's so interesting. So I was really looking forward to this book because it just centers around him and more of his backstory. I've only read the first 2 books of the Strain trilogy, and so I was just looking forward to learning more about the character. Unfortunately, I think it's a little retread, at least the first issue was, of some of the stuff that I knew about the character from the show and the first 2 books. But luckily, the artwork really makes up for it. It's really stunning. I love how pale they make Quinlan's character, because when he uses the stinger, the blood red stinger really jumps off the page. It's really amazing artwork. And there's some really cool gladiator scenes, because for those that have watched the show, you know that he used to be a Roman gladiator because he's been living for 1,000 years. And it's really interesting. I'm looking forward to kind of diving into more of the backstory of the character. I hope that the first issue was the only thing that was kind of retread, and they're going to go a little bit more in depth than the books and the show has so far. I'll keep reading it just because I love the show so much, and I'm really interested in the character. But just judging by the first issue, which of course is all I have to judge by, it seems like it'd be more interesting for somebody that hasn't read the books, or at least the first 2 that I've read, and has just watched the show and wants to know more about the character, because they really haven't gone too much into the character. I think the most that they've really talked about the character was this past episode. Well, I guess 2 weeks ago, by the time this episode airs, the next episode would have aired of The Strain. So I think it's definitely geared more towards people that are just fans of the series, at least the first issue. But I'm still finding things that I like about it. Yeah,
I have not watched The Strain. It's definitely on my to-do list.
I think you're tired of me talking about it.
No, not at all.
You keep saying the same thing over.
No, I really do want to watch it. It's just, we both said it before, once you get behind on a show, sure, it's so hard to find the motivation to go start from the beginning and catch up. So it's something I might wait till it's over and then binge the whole series before doing so.
I've talked a lot about the show, but I think it's a must-see for anybody that wants something different from their vampires, because it is a vampire show, but it is really, really different. I like some of the stuff that they've done to kind of change the mythology of it, and it has this really complex rules, and I'm really digging it.
I'll just stick to True Blood, I think.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
All right. So you ready for some nerd news?
Yeah. So every week, Pat and I talk about the big nerd headlines that have come up since the last time we spoke. This week was a struggle. It was really bad. I had to go deep to find a few things to talk about. Mostly nerd news is going to be me telling you about something and then just seeing if you're going to see this movie or not.
Okay.
The first one being Jumanji. So there is another Jumanji movie coming out. The cast includes Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Kevin Hart, Karen Gillan, and Jack Black. So they're filming this right now in Hawaii, and most people assumed it was going to be a reboot. I don't know if you know this or if we talked on the podcast. I don't believe we have, but The Rock has gone on record saying that this is a continuation of the first Jumanji. Obviously not a direct sequel because Robin Williams couldn't come back and so on and so forth. But he makes it sound like, at the end of that movie, the board game's kind of floating along and somebody finds it. So I'm assuming that eventually it makes its way to these characters. So yeah, like I said, I'm just kind of curious what your take on it is. I personally have a deep affection for the first Jumanji. Going back and watching it as an adult, I can definitely see the flaws now, but I was infatuated with that movie when I was a kid. I loved it very much. And of course, it's even more bittersweet now that Robin Williams has passed away. This is going to sound weird because he does make some shitty movies, but I kind of trust The Rock a little bit. Like,
really?
Yeah, I don't know. He's a charming motherfucker. So
yeah, but he makes bad movies. He does everything, and he makes bad movies.
He doesn't seem like he knows how to say no very well.
No.
But
or at all.
Like Central Intelligence, I ended up seeing that, and I really hated it. But people love it. Like, people love this guy. I don't know.
So you kind of started off Nerd News by saying that you were just going to say, will you see this movie? No, I won't see it.
I bet you see it. I bet we review it on this fucking podcast.
If it comes out in a really shitty week, we probably will review it. But other than that, I will not see this movie.
I will say I think it's cool that they're not just rebooting it. They're saying it's a continuation. I don't know what that means. I don't think they're going to be like, oh, remember that one kid that Robin Williams played? That happened. Like, I don't think they're going to call back to the first one, but it's cool that they
it would be stupid if they did, because then no one would play the fucking game again. Who in their right mind would play the game if they had prior knowledge of the game being played?
Obviously, you don't remember the first one, because at the end of the game, when they finished,
you are correct.
At the end of the first movie, they finished the game, and then it's like they go back in time, and they're him and who is it? Is it Bonnie Hunt or something? Whoever plays the female lead in that? Yeah, who cares? They're kids again, and then they grow up together and they get married, and like, so
there's time travel.
Kind of. The kids don't remember ever playing the game. Like, they get to relive their life because he spent his whole adulthood in the game. So, yeah.
That's stupid. I've actually seen that movie quite a lot as a kid, because it was one of those movies that was always on like repeat from all the movie channels. So I've seen it quite a few times. I don't remember that, surprisingly.
Oh yeah, that's like exactly how
I must have repressed the time travel bullshit.
The part of that movie that always fucked with me was whenever the kid starts turning into a monkey. I didn't like that when I was little. It kind of messed with my head.
Because it's stupid?
Maybe. I don't know. No, I think it's...
I don't know why I'm hating on Jumanji.
I know. I like Jumanji. All right. This next one is one of those news stories. It's not really a news story. I guess the head of ABC was being talked to, and he said they're really trying to pursue a live action Star Wars show.
Yeah. I thought they were going for it.
Right now, I said he's like, they're trying to figure it out. So my question to you is, like, would you be interested in a Star Wars TV show live action? And if so, what would you like to see them tackle?
I don't know. I mean, I love that universe, but I also love the Marvel universe, and I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Exactly.
So I'd like to say that I would watch it, but I think it would just be another Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It would be the people I don't care about. Like, I mean, they're never going to show you Thor. They're never going to show you Captain America.
They're never going to show you Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, they're never going to show you Han. So, I mean, I don't know, but I think that universe is so cool. There's so many things, like in the comic books. Like, I really am digging the comic books a lot, because they can kind of expand the universe and make things up to kind of fit the characters. And I think that a good writer and a good showrunner could do a really good job with that universe. But I don't know. I could say the same thing about Marvel. And again, I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I like my Star Wars movies. I like what they're doing with the movies, with like Rogue One and obviously the new trilogy. I just like... Did you watch Clone Wars? Did you watch Star Wars Rebels?
No.
And those had characters in it we knew. I mean, granted, it was animated, but it was still. Did
you ever watch the movie?
No. I mean, it's all still canon. I don't think that. I think that we all like it in theory, but it's going to be either really expensive and they won't do it, or it's going to be cheap and everybody's going to be pissed. Like, I don't see it ever being what we have it built up in our head to be. Unless they like swing for the fences and do like a Boba Fett origin series, like
That would be cool.
That might be kind of cool, but I think that it's like you said, they would go the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. route and you do the characters we don't care about or have never heard of, and like kind of wink at the camera about Jedi every once in a while.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just not interested in that because you get enough of that on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or on Gotham or those shows where they wink about certain things that we all know is going to happen, but we're not going to show you on this fucking TV show. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm kind of torn.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Mr. Sinister is the villain in Wolverine 3. The Wolverine. Bryan Singer basically confirmed it, I think, on a commentary track on X-Men Apocalypse, the end credit scene where it's talking
people
about
actually
Essex.
bought that on Blu-ray.
It's not out yet. I think that it's like on digital. You can listen to the commentary track. You're not going to buy it when it comes out?
Nope.
I own every single X-Men movie. I'm like obligated to at this point. But I'm not saying that.
You have Wolverine Origins?
No comment.
Well, you just commented.
Anyways,
that's embarrassing. You should be embarrassed.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it, but I do own it. So I don't know a ton about Mr. Sinister. I believe that he was in the Deadpool video game I played, but it's been so long since I played that. But I've never actually. I don't read a lot of X-Men comics. I don't remember the show very much. I don't know a lot about the character except for what I've read in articles surrounding him being in this movie.
Yeah, me either.
He's like the one last big bad they haven't done, but
yeah, they've been doing a lot of these X-Men movies. They're kind of running out.
Yeah. So
I really liked Wolverine though. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to.
It was good. There was some stuff at the end with like the old man and the mech suit or whatever that was pretty cheesy. But besides that,
didn't bother me. I actually kind of liked that.
Yeah. Well, that's weird that you like that, but you can't remember shit about Jumanji. Last thing is kind of good news in our opinion, but I guess Kaylee, I'm going to fuck up her last name because I've never heard it pronounced. Kaylee Cuoco, the girl from Big Bang Theory. Yeah, so she was on Jimmy Kimmel, and I guess he was talking about season 11, and she made it sound like there will be no more Big Bang Theory after season 10 because it's just so expensive. And I did not realize this, but her, Jim Parsons, and Johnny Galecki each get $1 million an episode for that fucking 20-minute show they do. And it's usually like a 24 episode season. So that's $72 million a season just in paying those three fuckheads. So CBS, I mean, it's a garbage show. Just does not capture nerd culture at all, and they think they do, and people watch it and think they know about nerdy stuff because of that show, and it's infuriating. So I'm all for it being dead.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the show a lot. I don't like it because I don't think those characters exist. I don't think that you find however many characters, was there like 4 or 5 of them, that like every single nerdy thing. I mean, there's not characters like that. No. Like, I fucking hate Jumanji. Just kidding. I don't know why. I never thought that we were going to talk about Jumanji today.
I should have given you a heads up so you could have watched it.
Yeah, apparently I don't remember anything about Jumanji. But I just don't think those characters exist, and they certainly don't know each other. Like I said, that show has a really huge small world problem. Yeah. Because if those characters do exist, they don't fucking know each other, and they're certainly not roommates.
I wonder what the other 3 dudes get. Like, if those guys are getting $1 million an episode, what do the other characters get? Like, they've just done it for 10 years. I mean, I'm sure it's not cheap.
No.
But who gives a shit?
I mean, I'll be so glad when that show's over.
Absolutely, man. Hopefully that is soon. That is all I have for nerd news.
All right. So our next segment is just kind of plainly called Main Topic. It changes from episode to episode. We've been doing a lot of reviews, being kind of the end of summer movie season, even though summer's not technically over yet. I just say that to troll Tyler. Anyways, we're going to be reviewing another movie. We're going to be reviewing Blair Witch, which is directed by Adam Wingard. I don't know if I said that. Probably not. I've never actually heard it pronounced before. He's the director of You're Next, which is a film that I love.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah. My wife and I actually were a couple of the invaders from You're Next for Halloween last Halloween. I love that movie. It's great. It's about James, the brother of Heather from the original Blair Witch Project, convinces his 3 friends, one of which is an inspiring documentarian. Is that what they're called? documentarian.
Sure.
To help search for the house where Heather was last seen. Tyler and I saw this last Thursday, so we skipped what I thought was going to be a really boring Thursday night football game and went and saw this instead. It was actually kind of weird because I ran into my buddy Mike from The Obsessive Viewer. It's always weird when you run into someone that you've known since like junior high and know like really well and not expecting it. Like we went and saw the movie with Mike and I had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was totally weird. Mike and his friend Jake were both really psyched for the movie and they were kind of talking it up before the movie started, and their excitement kind of got me more excited. And by the time the movie started, I was actually pretty excited for it.
Yeah. That's cool because I knew that it wasn't something you were particularly looking forward to.
Yeah, it had gotten some good reviews. It wasn't really on my radar to begin with, but we haven't necessarily seen a ton of really standout horror movies.
Yeah.
I mean, Don't Breathe was more of a thriller than anything else. Lights Out was kind of disappointing.
It wasn't really scary.
No, it wasn't. It was kind of silly.
Yeah.
And then
I think we both gave it positive reviews, though, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought we didn't officially review that, did we?
Oh, I think it was what we were into. Yeah, it was what you were into.
But The Conjuring 2 was great.
Yeah.
We both really liked that. But other than that, this summer has been kind of hit or miss with the horror film. So it wasn't necessarily something that was on my radar, but the more I read about it and the more they kind of talked it up before the movie started, I was actually looking forward to it. They
announced this movie was in production. It was called The Woods, and nobody knew it was a Blair Witch sequel. And at Comic-Con, they revealed that it's the Blair Witch. And as soon as that news broke, I had come over here to record an episode of the podcast, and I was kind of excited. And I was like, "Did you see that they announced, like, they showed the trailer for the Blair Witch sequel, and it's like coming out in 2 months?" And you were like, "I don't care." like you're not interested at all.
Well, I guess we could just get into
for sure.
Get into broad strokes. We start off each movie review by kind of just giving a general overview of what we thought about it. I honestly, when I go into a movie, I hate letting my bias affect how I feel about that particular movie. But unfortunately, this movie kind of already had 2 strikes against it as far as I'm concerned. I am not a fan of the original. It's not a bad movie. I just think I was too old when I saw it. Like, it came out and I guess I was in like the 6th or 7th grade. I don't really remember. It was 97? 99?
Yeah.
99?
I want to say it was 99.
Yeah, so I was 12. So I was like 6th, 7th grade. And I remember it being like a phenomenon. Like, people didn't know if this was real or not. Like, people were freaking out about this movie. And I just never saw it. And I just waited so long. I actually didn't see this movie until last October. And it had built up over decades.
Yeah.
And then I just didn't get it. I thought it was boring. Like, it just didn't do it for me. And I don't like the shaky cam found footage genre. I just am not impressed at all. So this movie just kind of had 2 strikes against it before we even started. And the first, I would say, hour and 15 minutes did literally nothing to change my opinion about it. And I don't think the third act necessarily did enough to make up for that. I think it's a really solid third act, but it just doesn't make up for an hour and 15 minutes of the same old shaky cam found footage tropes that we're used to.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm in the same boat with you on the first one. I didn't see it until I was in college, and I thought that it was super boring because that movie, pretty much nothing happens.
Yeah.
So
a little bit with the tent scene, and then of course at the end with the house.
Yeah. So that's it in that whole movie. And the reason that movie is so highly regarded is because it was like the first movie that went viral, and people thought it was real and all that stuff. And it was the first shaky cam movie that kind of found success, and it had such a tiny budget and made so much money. So all those things together made it like this cult classic. People regard it for kind of changing the genre for good or for bad. And if you're Pat, I don't mind shaky cam movies or found footage movies if it's done right. But most of the time it's not. I think that there's some effective scares you can do with found footage movies. Most of the time, like you've said, like it doesn't happen correctly. So I'm definitely in the same boat with you on the first one. That being said, like I'm kind of in a bit of a panic. So I pulled up the IMDb page like I typically do when we review movies, just in case I need to reference somebody's name. And I saw that it has a really terrible rating on IMDb. So that sent me into a bit of a panic because I liked this movie.
Okay.
I thought that...
I'm actually excited. We usually agree. So I'm glad that we're going to disagree a little bit.
Like, when I say I like it, like, we'll get into the details. Like, I did not love this movie, but I thought that it was a really effective horror movie and a worthy predecessor to the original because I have such low feelings about the original. So
I think it's better than the original, but that's because I hold that movie in such low regard.
Like, this movie genuinely creeped me out a few times, and anytime a horror movie can do that to me, like, I'm intrigued, I'm interested. So I will say, that being said, there were also times that this movie genuinely annoyed me as well. Not as much as the original. The original is three bitchy people just
getting lost in the woods,
getting pissed at each other for an hour and a half or however long it is. That this movie kind of avoids it just being the main part of the story. Like, this movie goes in other directions, and I really appreciated that. But there were still scenes that just had me kind of rolling my eyes because I was annoyed with the characters.
For sure. So we're going to dive right into the story. For me, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's very similar to the first one. They go out in the woods, and of course they get lost, just like they do in the first one. My main problem with found footage is I don't like when I get taken out of the movie going experience. I like to get lost in watching a movie. With found footage, I'm constantly reminded that I'm watching a movie because they constantly have to remind you why they're still filming it. Like, when shit goes bad, why are these people still filming this movie? And they constantly have to tell you and re-explain it. And that bothers me because it takes me out of the movie. And I feel it's unrealistic that this person would still be shooting it. My go-to example is TJ Miller in Cloverfield. There's no fucking way that dude's still filming that when the shit goes down. When they're in the subway tunnel, no fucking way. Well, subway tunnel because of the night vision. But anyways, this movie didn't bother me as much because they didn't necessarily spend too much time explaining it. And they also had those little cameras on their ears. So it was clipped to their ear. So it made sense because even if they didn't want to film it anymore, it was still clipped to them, so they had to film it. Yeah,
exactly. At a certain point, when you're that terrified as those characters where you don't even think about the thing on your ear.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they're not going to take it off because it's still... And it has a GPS on it, so the other people can find them. So, I liked that because it kind of got away from one of my main problems with those particular movies. Like I said, we bumped into my friend... Mike from The Obsessive Viewer, and he brought up this really good point that I'm going to steal, but I'm giving him credit, so I guess it's not really stealing. He said that he found it interesting that they just kind of went out and the Blair Witch was real in this movie, because in the first one, it could just be three people getting lost in the woods and kind of losing their mind a little bit. They kind of leave it open-ended that way, but this one, she's real, and she fucks with you and she kills you, and so... I just thought that was an interesting point.
I never thought of her not being real in the first one.
Really?
Yeah, like, it never crossed my mind, like, oh, maybe these people were just crazy. Like, especially the end of that movie.
Well, I mean, I still think you could chalk it up because you never actually see her.
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool theory, but I never connected that watching it or thinking about it.
Yeah, so I just thought that was an interesting point because they do kind of go over the top with it because you see her multiple times, especially in the third act. I was actually, and this is going to be a weird thing to bring up, but I was actually pleasantly surprised in the lack of nudity in this movie, considering it's rated R and it's a horror movie and they're camping in the woods. You kind of just assume when they're in the woods, it's a horror movie. Bitches gonna get naked. I was pleasantly surprised by that.
I did not go into this movie expecting nudity. I think that shows the different wavelengths our brains are on. It sounds like you're kind of actually not happy with it. Like, this is your way of being like, that's cool. I didn't want nudity anyways.
No, I just think that's just... I think you get trope? More... Yeah, I think you get that more with, like, slasher films than necessarily found footage movies. But I thought it was kind of... cool that they kind of broke away from that trope. There was quite a few threads in this movie that are introduced and not really fleshed out. And I know that they're not necessarily that important. It just kind of bothers me when they kind of leave stuff like that. They introduce something and they don't really explain it. There's a weird relationship between James and the main girl, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head. It's Lisa. They kind of tease this budding relationship, and they never really flesh it out, like why they're so kind of weird about each other. They're like friends, but you could tell that he kind of wants to be more than friends, and I don't know. It's just kind of weird. They also have this thing where one of the other girls steps on something in the creek, and then something's inside of her and she pulls it out. They don't really explain what that's all about, and she kind of falls off the tree, and then you never really hear from her again. And it's just kind of weird. And then there's another thread with the other couple, the locals that they have to team up with. They kind of infer that they might have something to do with this, and then they kind of were the reason that they came out there, and they were kind of helping the Blair Witch in some aspects, but they never really truly explain that. And I know it's not necessarily the point of the movie, but it's still, they bring it up a couple of times. It would still be nice if they spent more time explaining some of these things.
I don't know. Like, to me, they kind of tease the stuff between those two characters, like you said they did. But shit just kind of starts hitting the fan before they can explore it even further, but
you're making the movie. You can make time. It's
I didn't want this movie to be longer. Like, I'm good with found footage in small doses. If this had been a 2-hour movie, I would have lost a lot of interest, especially because movies like this, it takes so long for shit to get crazy. Like, there's such a slow build up to it that I don't need to watch these two characters fall in love before they die or don't die or whatever. To me, I thought the story was pretty effective. It makes sense that James would want to go find his sister. I mean,
let's be realistic. She's not there.
Yeah.
Like, what does he really expect?
Well, that's the next thing I was going to say was what doesn't make sense is that he's thought some blurry girl on a video on the internet was his sister, because there is like they don't look the same at all. And it's a blurry picture. So the fact that he thinks that's his sister is pretty far-fetched. Like, I think they could have gone a better route to get him to want to go back into the woods to look for his sister than the way they did. And everything kind of comes full circle at the ending, and I kind of get it. But still, like, I think that there's a better plot device you could use to get him to want to get a group to go find Heather. So
what I don't understand, and I'm glad that you brought the tape up, is they clearly, the other couple, and is this too spoilery?
I don't know. Maybe not. You want me to say no, so I'll say no.
Yeah, so we're just going to go for it. The couple admits that they had something to do with the tape. And then you see something very similar to what's on the tape actually happen to a character.
It's not very similar. It's like the exact shot.
Yeah. How does that happen?
Witchcraft Dawg.
How does she know that happened, though?
Witchcraft Dawg? She's a witch.
I don't feel like you're explaining anything.
Like, there's a lot of time lapse in this movie, so, which creeped me out genuinely. Like, so, without giving too much away about one of the issues, like, two characters leave the group at a certain point, and whenever the group meets back up, they're like, when was the last time we saw you? And he says, earlier this afternoon, and the other two characters says it's like been 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
So obviously time is skewed. The sun's not coming up anymore when they're in the woods and things are going bad. So Witchcraft Dawg.
Yeah, I get that you're suspending your belief a little bit, but my interpretation is that she can control the woods is her universe. She can control that. But
what does she control it with? Witchcraft Dawg.
I fucking hate you. Anyways, I'm just going to drop it because you're just going to keep saying that. And I want that to stop immediately.
I thought that the flow of this movie was a lot better than the first movie. I thought that things, like, it went by really quickly. Like, it took a while for things to start getting creepy, but it didn't feel like it took a while. Like, I looked down at my phone at one point to see how long it had been, and it had been like an hour, but it didn't feel like it. So I thought that the movie
it's funny that you brought that up because I had the opposite reaction.
Really? That's interesting.
I just felt like it took way too long for shit to get anywhere. And I mean, we're going to talk a little bit, the last little section of the review will be like the action/horror. And I was going to bring that up then, but I'll just go ahead and say it. I thought that they relied too much on like found footage kind of tropey gags, like with the camera cutting out. And I don't know. There was a lot of that at the beginning, like the first hour of the movie was a lot of those typical found footage kind of jump scare kind of gags.
Yeah. I mean, none of them stick out to me at the front of my mind, but I don't know. I thought the movie was genuinely scary, and we'll talk about that more in horror. I will say, though, with it being genuinely scary and there being genuinely creepy parts while we're still in the story aspect of it, there were scenes put in this movie that didn't make sense to me in relation to the movie. Just to get a scare in there or to get the audience to feel uncomfortable, it really didn't make sense for characters to make certain decisions. So, like, why do we need to climb a tree to get?
No way. There's no way that would ever
especially
happen.
when her legs all fucked up. Like, that doesn't make sense. That's just trying to get people who are scared of heights to kind of cringe. Why do we have to have a scene where somebody crawls through a really, really tight space? Like, that part was not necessary for the movie. It's just to make people. I
thought that they planted that pretty well because they talked about the house and how it had tunnels underneath it.
Okay, I missed that part. I don't remember. It was
really quick, and so as soon as you see the house, I'm like, okay. Granted, I had seen clips from this movie, and I saw that there's a scene, so I kind of assumed that that's where it was going to happen. But as soon as they said that in the movie, I was like, well, they're going to get to the house, and that's going to be the house that they're referring to, and that's how she's going to get underneath.
See, I think that those were kind of shoehorned in to give it a couple cringeworthy scenes that didn't involve the Blair Witch. Like, it didn't make sense to me within the movie. Like, they wanted to scare people with certain phobias, and it worked. Like, the part where she's crawling through that small tunnel made me uncomfortable because, like, that'd be terrifying.
Yeah, for sure.
But it didn't need to be in a movie about the Blair Witch.
I disagree because I think that scene was effective. I will agree with you with the tree.
Yeah.
That bothered me because there's no fucking way that you do that. But given what happened to the other character, she had no other choice.
Yeah.
And I felt like she portrayed the fact that she was just like, she really didn't want to do it, but she realized that was her only option.
Yeah.
The tree was stupid. There's no way. I don't care if the drone's up there. I'm not climbing that motherfucking tree. There's no way.
All right, man. You want to go on to performances?
Sure. I think that I don't have much to say about performances.
Nope.
A lot of pretty unknown actors are in this movie, and I think you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to stuff like that. What was her name? Was the main lady? Lisa was played by Kaylee Hernandez.
Yeah.
Which I recognize her face. I don't know where I place her at, but I've seen her before. She did most of the heavy lifting in the third act, and I thought she did a good job. But I didn't think James was all that good. The guy that played James, I didn't think he was all that good, but he didn't have a ton to work with as far as the scenes were concerned. Everybody else was just I was indifferent to.
I'll say that I was pretty much indifferent to everyone. I will say that you're right. Callie Hernandez stood out a little bit more than everybody else. But one character in particular, I cringed whenever he talked, and that was the character of Lane, who was played by Wes Robinson. Like, he was not good. But everybody else, I'm pretty indifferent to. So I don't really have a lot for performances. They did what they could in a found footage movie. You don't watch these movies for the performances.
Yeah, and it's kind of typical of the genre, not just found footage, but horror in general. You typically get more unknown actors and actresses. And like I said, you kind of get what you pay for.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. So the last little segment, like I mentioned before, is kind of the action/horror. Like I said before, I think a lot of the first hour of this movie is the typical found footage jump scare type of gags. And I just didn't like that. Obviously, I don't like the genre. So I was a little bit disappointed that a good director would kind of fall into those tropes. The tent thing made me laugh, actually, where the tent goes up.
Oh, yeah.
And then comes back down. I just felt like they took one of the few effective scenes from the Blair Witch Project and felt like they had to kind of take it to 11, and it just didn't work for me. I knew something was going to happen with those tents because it's what happens in Blair Witch Project. And I just thought it was just kind of silly. I literally laughed out loud.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. That scene wasn't just the tent taken off. There was a lot going on in that scene, and that was just part of it. Now, whenever it falls back down and the characters get scared, that did not scare me. That made me laugh when it came back down. But whenever it shooted up, like, I wasn't necessarily scared by it, but I didn't think that was humorous.
I did. I just thought it was funny because I knew something was going to happen, and it was the easiest thing that you could do with it. And it just it bothered me a little bit. He certainly knows how to build tension, and he knows how to shoot a scene. Like, it was beautiful to look at for a found footage movie. I thought the score was really great. I thought the sound was good. I don't know, man. It didn't hit me like I thought it was going to. Mike and Jake kind of talked it up a little bit. Mike actually brought up another good point. This is kind of like our review with a special guest appearances from Mike from the Obsessive Viewer. He made another really good point. He mentioned after the movie that, and this is going to sound a little bit pretentious, but it was Mike that said it, not me. He said guys like us that watch a lot of horror movies weren't really super scared by this movie, but teenagers, this is going to be the scariest movie they've ever seen. And I agree with that, because especially with the third act. It made you very, very uncomfortable, but the first hour and 15 was pretty mediocre for me.
I really applaud this movie because I think that they took a really solid setup that was created by the original, and they made it so much better. We've shared our opinion on the first one, and I feel like the first one had a lot of potential, had a cool story, like a witch in the woods. It's fucking with these kids. And then it just kind of ends. Like, you never see the witch. The last shot of the movie that's supposed to be like the big scary shot is a dude standing in a corner. And while it's creepy, and I'm sure it was a lot creepier back in 1999, things have changed a lot since then, and people expect more. In this movie, in my opinion, took that solid setup and worked with it really well. I don't know. This movie gave me most of what I wanted in the first one in this. I'm the type of person who, I hate to say it, but I'm the guy who needs to see The Thing. Yeah. So you can say like, oh, it's the feel of the movie, and you don't need to see the creature because the atmosphere is scary. And that's kind of what the first one did. But all I wanted in that first movie was to see the witch. And you've kind of mentioned it already. You see very few glimpses of the witch in this movie. She's never shown close up. You don't really see a solid look at her, but you see enough of her to be genuinely creeped out and knowing what these people are dealing with. And I think that made this movie a lot more effective than the first one. Yeah.
I mean, we've stated before that we aren't fans of the first one. So to say that this one is far and away better than the first one, it's really not setting the bar very high.
Well, I think that people, like, even judging by the reviews I've seen and judging by the score that it has on IMDb right now, it's like, I think people hold the first one in high regard still. And I don't get it. I think that this movie's did it a million times better. And that's why I'm going to end up giving it a more positive review than I would ever give the first one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So why don't we just go ahead and give it the star rating?
I'm going to give it, I'm going back and forth between 3 and 3.5. I think that for now, until I see it again in future Shocktober's, I'm going to stick with a 3 because I do recommend it, and I did enjoy it, and I do think that it's probably the second scariest movie I've seen this year.
Okay, I'd agree with that. Can't think of another one that I've seen that I would put up there. I will say that I'm also going to give it a 3, but it's
what the fuck?
Well, I mean, we've kind of,
I don't want to talk you out of a 3 because I like. Well,
I mean, I think that we've kind of forced ourselves because we kind of set that standard of saying 3 is a recommend, and I definitely recommend this movie because, like I said, it's better than the first one. And I think the third act is really, really well done. It is a very scary 15 minutes, very uncomfortable 15 minutes. But the other part of the movie, the majority of the movie, is a bunch of jump scares and people walking through the woods, which is a lot of what the first movie is, minus the jump scares. And I think it could have been a lot better, but it is an effectively scary 15-20 minutes. So I do recommend it. I would say just don't set your expectations very high.
Okay.
So it's a very, very soft 3, but since I am saying that I would recommend it, we have said in the past that means we are giving it a 3. So I'm giving it a 3.
Okay.
All right. So last segment, we always kind of try to cap off each episode by asking a very nerdy question. Tyler and I take turns each episode asking what our favorite blank is. And this episode is my turn. So I'm going to ask what your favorite horror sequel is, now that we just spent the last 30 minutes talking about Blair Witch, which is, of course, a sequel of the 99 movie Blair Witch Project. For me, favorite horror sequel of all time, it's between Aliens and Dawn of the Dead. I feel like those are the two most obvious selections. I'm going to ultimately go with Dawn of the Dead, mostly because I think Alien is a very underrated horror movie. Most people think of it as a sci-fi movie, but it's more of a horror movie. I think it's definitely underrated as a horror movie. But Aliens, even though it is a sequel to Alien, isn't really a horror movie. It's more of a sci-fi movie, kind of a monster movie. There's a ton more aliens in this one, obviously, as the title would suggest. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror sequel, because it's much more of a sci-fi movie, even though Dawn of the Dead is not really a sequel necessarily in the conventional sense of Night of the Living Dead. I think it's fantastic the way that Romero goes from a really small movie like Night of the Living Dead with just a micro budget, just a crazy small budget for as successful as this movie was. And it's almost like a bottle episode of a TV show. Like, it's so contained. And then to go from that movie to something that's compared to that movie is such a huge, like, monumental task. To start off with the helicopter and then being in the mall, and then that third act is just crazy in the best way. I just think it's such a monumental task to go from such a small movie to such a large movie, and to still have the great characters and the great character development is just fantastic. So that movie, even though I don't think it's as good as Night of the Living Dead, I think the fact that he was able to kind of still create these really strong characters and these really strong relationships and still build a bigger world, I think is a phenomenal task.
Cool. I am going to go with, I think, a horror franchise that I really love the mythology of, and that's Halloween. Obviously, there's like 9 or 10 sequels.
The Rob Zombie?
No, I hate the Rob Zombie movies. But honestly, there's 2 sequels to that movie that really stand out to me. Like Halloween H2O, I loved whenever it came out in the 90s, but I've watched it since, and it doesn't hold up as well as I would remember.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think any of them hold up.
So my answer is Halloween 2. Which was written by John Carpenter but not directed. I think what I loved about that movie so much is it picks up directly after the first one, and I love the hospital stuff in that movie. I think that it's really effective, and a lot of the scares in that still hold up, and it's still creepy having him saunter through this creepy dark hospital, and I just love the continuation from the first movie as well, like I mentioned. So I'm a sucker for the Halloween franchise, just like you're a sucker for the Of the Dead franchise, and I wanted to spotlight one of the movies from there. I do have a soft spot for H2O because Jamie Lee Curtis obviously comes back for that movie and is a continuation of her character Laurie's story, but I'm going to go with 2 just because, you know, as soon as you're done watching the first Halloween movie, you're curious what happened, why he got shot 6 times and his body's gone. And that movie starts to build the myth of Michael Myers that lasted for an entire franchise.
Cool, man. It just, horror sequels in general are not that great. I actually almost went with a movie that I saw for the first time recently, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I really liked that one.
I have not seen that.
Yeah, I just love how meta it is.
Yeah, I want to watch it because I actually do own the Night of the Living Dead Blu-ray set, and But the only one I've ever seen is the original. And I actually saw
Nightmare on Elm Street is what you meant.
Oh shit! What'd you say?
You said Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Nightmare on Elm Street. I own the Blu-ray set of that, and I've only seen the original and the remake. So I got quite a few movies that I'll probably work through for Shocktober.
All right, cool, man. So that is it for episode 111 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. Unfortunately, there is not going to be an episode next week. I'm going to be out of town for my nephew's baptism. I had to think about what it was called for a second there.
I was like, hey, did you forget he's your nephew?
No, I couldn't think of what it was called, which just shows you how good of a Catholic I am. But anyways, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Nerds Podcast on both. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Google+. Also vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. You can comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can check out our Twitch channel, which Tyler does a weekly stream Monday at 9 p.m. Central. Subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. You can email us at thenerdyourlookingfor@gmail.com. We will be attending and participating in Shocktober in Irvington, Friday, October 14th. Tickets are available at obsessiveviewer.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are the Nerd You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Witchcraft Dawg.
You're stupid.